everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Outwise Insights. I'm your host, Tora, and today we have a discussion lined up for you on effective leadership for businesses today. Joining us is Daniel Vannier, an author, lecturer, coach, speaker, and consultant specializing in culture transformation, leadership, talent development, and HR. Daniel's passion revolves around fostering clarity and building relationships as the foundation for driving personal and organizational change. With a wealth of experience driven by a commitment to self-reflection, he's a profound believer in individual and organizational growth. Notably, he is also an author of the successful book Unlearning Hierarchy, a practical guide for organizations and individuals aiming to transition from traditional hierarchies to more agile and self-organized structures, drawing on insights from executives who have navigated this transformative journey. So Daniel, so good to have you in our podcast. How are you doing today?
Tara, thanks a lot for being here. It's a pleasure. I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. And you're in Germany. We're getting super international with this podcast. Last time we had someone from Nigeria. Before that, it was Dubai. And I think you're in Munich. How's Munich doing? How's everything with the snowstorm?
Very good today. So 2 weeks ago, if we would have spoken then, it would have been total chaos. So I think we had a couple of days where no airplane actually could land or depart from Munich airport. But you know what? I mean, I'm actually a big snow fan, and I was lucky not to travel during that time. And we had like half a meter of snow, so it was really beautiful. But now it's all gone because weather became warmer again, and but yeah, let's hope that probably for Christmas time we have a little bit of snow.
Yeah. Winter Wonderland only stays for a few days. This is the case with winter. So, but
very true.
But yeah, super cool. But Daniel, I don't think I said enough in my little introduction about you. Do you want to tell me a bit about yourself, what you do, and kind of how you became this just great consultant in leadership?
Sure, very happy to. So I think you said already quite some things.
I said a lot.
I probably can change. That's true. Yeah, you actually covered everything. We can stop the podcast
here. Exactly.
No, just kidding. I think it was a nice introduction, and I think what's probably helpful to add is a little bit around my journey. So I started as business economics guy, and I'm always joking and saying I'm a trained economist, but I'm a psychologist by heart and a hobby psychologist, because over time all the individual psychological topics, but then also the system topics within an organization became very dear to me, and I was super intrigued by that. So actually I started my professional career as a strategy consultant. And while I learned a lot during those first 3 years, I always felt that when we're doing strategy, when we're improving the bottom and top line, when we, we're crafting some sales strategies, always one element was missing, and this was the element on how do we actually bring people into motion? How do we bring an organization into motion and into change and transformation? And on a piece of paper, this always seems super simple. But if you want to then put it into practice, this is where the magic happens. And this is also where the complexity comes into play, because individuals are complex, systems are even more complex. And so I started to really being intrigued by what it actually takes to make an organization future fit, make people future fit. And with that, my passion for learning, executive development, for leadership development, organizational development, coaching, and all those kind of things came into play. So I would say the last probably 15 to 18 years, I worked for different multinational companies, luckily always in very international and global teams. And I mostly was working on the intersection of business strategy, and then let's say the development pieces of the HR organization. And that's what I have done in different multinational companies, as I said. So among them, SAP, the global software company, but also Deutsche Telekom, a big tech company in the telecommunication space. After this time, I kind of figured out that as much as I love to work within those bigger systems and the grateful I was for all the learnings, I decided to make a step out of the system and well, get self-employed after writing my second book and helping, a different set of companies, smaller and bigger ones. So I also got into startups and scale-ups, into individual executive coaching. But then, of course, still, my former home harbor, if you will, the multinational companies. This happened around 2 years ago. And since then, I have the big pleasure of playing different roles for different companies, different leaders, different teams. So I would say I'm a bit of a mixture of an organizational talent and leadership developer, always with a few side topics of new work, the topic of self-organization, agile teams, all that came into play. And I think now even more than ever before, I would say, are these topics becoming super important and are on a day-to-day agenda of not only HR people within organizations, but really became CEO topics and CFO topics. So really critical ones if you wanna win in the game. So this is a little bit about my history and how I came to what is my role or my different roles today.
Okay, super interesting what you do. What capabilities are crucial for effective leadership, would you say, in your opinion and in your knowledge?
Yeah. It's a small and a big question at the same time, right? It's a small question because actually you can go to ChatGPT and they will tell you and just, spit out a few, let's say, notorious capabilities that leaders have. I wanna focus on a few ones, and that's why it's a little bit more extensive what I'm sharing. Just because of my own experience being a leader, being led by good and also bad and ineffective leaders, but also seeing how actually the whole geopolitical game changes, and by that the whole economy changes, and by that society changes and companies change. While companies are oftentimes really just a reflection of what's happening in the world, especially if you work in a global organization. So if you now mirror this into what is important for leadership and what makes leadership effective, I would like to highlight 3 things. So for me, leadership is still a huge privilege to serve people, to develop people, to make them better, right? Something that in many organizations still today is overseen because they look at business leaders. So they look how to get the bottom line right, how to acquire new customers, how to create new products, how to craft innovation. All super important things. But at the end of the day, if you decide to become a leader, and by that also people leader in most organizations, it's so important to show empathy. And I know, again, this is a big word, so let me decode it a little bit. For me, empathy really means that you have the personal capacity to reflect, to self-regulate, and to steer emotions in yourself, but also in others, right? And I think the more and more we are becoming confronted with all the transformation that is happening out there, and the more and more we're also confronted with new needs that a new generation brings into our organizational systems, the more are we finding out how important it is to give emotions in the organizational context a room, because they are there anyhow. So let's find out how to deal with them in a productive manner. And this is really a capability that leaders need to evolve more on, especially if you worked in technical spaces. Leaders are sometimes, leading an organization in a very technocratic manner, and this is changing massively. So it's super important. The second one that I want to highlight is the topic actually of creating clarity. If you read the surveys out there, if you take a note on the current Gallup Insights and many other studies out there, you will see that people are gradually feeling more insecure in this world, right? And not only insecure in the economic space, but with COVID, with the wars that have broken out in recent times, with this economic instability, people just feel insecure, right? And with so much change, although we as leaders sometimes hope and wish and really assume that everybody can and needs to take that change, this is not the reality, right? So a good leader, for me, needs to have the capability to personally be resilient, to take the change out there and the complexity, and at the same time create stability and create also clarity for the people working for and with you. And this is so important because without that clarity and stability, right, people have really a hard time in creating value for customers and being innovative because they're just fearing things, right? They're insecure. So this is super, super important. And I know that's a difficult task, right? Because it really means that you have to personally deal with something that is new to you and try to get a personal balance and resilience at the same time, try to take your team on a journey that they feel secure. And it sometimes seems a little bit like a contradiction, but that's for me a super, super important capability. And if you allow me to add a third one, it's really inspiration, right? I don't think that, a leader can just inspire people by, holding great speeches or coming up with great innovations and products. But a good leader can really, trigger the inspiration within people, because everybody has the own quality to get inspired and to be inspired. But in many workplaces today, it's all about, only creating results, only looking at the bottom line, not so much looking into where do we actually want to go? What is it that brings us together as a team, as an organization? What is the bigger purpose of a team and an organization that I personally and I alone individually cannot achieve? So I think, again, this for me is a third super important capability that leaders in today's environment have. If we talk in 10 years, probably that's different. But this is like a spotlight of what I experience, what I see in the marketplace.
No. I think it's great what you said. I mean, for sure, leadership isn't about holding authority over someone else. It's about positively influencing people to reach new heights. Through empathy, stability, and inspiration, like you said. I completely agree. And in what ways is leadership influencing and reshaping organizational culture today?
Yeah, so for me, leadership is the single most influential lever on a company, on an organizational culture. And when I say leadership, I probably have to disclaim something. So when I mean leadership, I don't mean that the leaders within a company are the single most effective lever, but it's really the leadership. And what I mean with that is that I think we have to revisit and have to rethink the way we look at leadership. Right? So we're coming from an industrial age where we have kind of, segregated leadership and management, or we have even segregated management and then the work that is done, right? So the thinking and the doing were separated back then. Probably a good concept for, industrialization, for economy of scale, for, really getting more effective and also getting more cost economic and saving. But today we are in a different environment, right? The environment that we're having today in most cases means that it's not about efficiency anymore. Of course, companies need to look at their costs, don't get me wrong. And of course, companies cannot just only have like a nice purpose, but they have to, at the end of the day, earn some money. That's very clear, right? But a corporate culture or a culture of an organization is really driven by the way we look at leadership, we shape leadership, how we nurture leadership. And for me, as we come from this era of, I would say, personalized leadership, meaning that we have this one person on the top of the organizational chart that was kind of responsible for everything, that was, kind of ruling top down and taking the decisions that then flow downwards in the organization. This is not the case anymore, right? We're living in an age of complexity where you cannot rely on this single heroic leader on top of the organizational chart, but you have to rethink leadership, which means that you have to distribute power, you have to distribute decision-making authority, and you have to distribute also responsibility and ownership to more shoulders in the organization in an intelligent and systematic and structured manner. So this is super important. Meaning that when I'm talking about leadership as the biggest lever, it really means the way we think about leadership, the what we expect from people who take leadership roles, the way we look at behaviors, the way we sanction, red flag behaviors, unwanted behavior, the way we incentivize good behaviors from people taking leadership, even without having a formal leadership position. This is really very much mirrored in the structure and the culture of an organization, and it really shapes the culture of an organization. So I always look at leadership when companies, ask me to support them on transforming their organizational culture.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I completely agree with that. And how can organizations effectively navigate the challenges of digitalization? I mean, I guess now in today's world, we have, I guess, the slight fear that AI might replace us. What do you think about this?
Well, so I'm always, first and foremost, I'm a guy who always looks at the positive things of any new innovation, of any new technology, without having rose-tinted glasses, right? I do see dangers in AI for society as a whole, also for our job landscapes and for individual jobs and roles. At the same time, we have seen that again, coming back to industrialization, if you, for example, compare this to the agrarian age, then a lot of jobs got lost, but others have been created, right?
Yeah.
So is there a transformation that is massively coming through AI? A clear and big yes, definitely, right? I mean, the speed that you see out there. I mean, I don't know, when was OpenAI first launched to the public? I think it was not only it was a half year ago, probably, right? Today, I couldn't even think of eliminating this, right? Because I'm getting so much more productive. For example, I just came out of a board meeting this morning, and what we've done, I remember me as a young consultant, I was always taking the notes, and then afterwards I had to write the minutes. I have to check the minutes with many different parties. You know what I'm doing today? I'm just having the meeting being transcribed. I take the transcription document, I'll upload it on ChatGPT, and I ask ChatGPT to come up with a summary with action items out of this. I mean, that's fascinating, right? I mean, I really spent probably a tenth of the time that I would have spent before. So what I wanted to say, I think there are really, really big benefits in that. And I think this is now the crucial, sometimes probably even a bit philosophical question, what is then left for humans? Right? What is the human piece in all that? And what is the human piece in leadership? And I truly think that while a leader should be on the forefront of using technology, being on the forefront of asking others to use technology, to try it out, right, to test it, to think about how can we standardize things, how can we automate things, how can we digitize things, to really focus on the very important topics that probably AI today, and I'm saying today because I don't have a crystal ball, that AI today cannot do for us, right? And this is really this, personal component. This is leading individuals. This is, person and personality development. And this for me is a very crucial core aspect of what leaders should do and should focus on when they're leading a team. They should really think about how can I make, that person grow above what they are today? How can they tap into their full potential, right? What are the areas that I can, assign them to so that they can, really grow and accelerate their development? So these are things where AI could, certainly already today be a good helping hand, but will never do the job of a leader. So it's two things to summarize it. So first of all, I would say, a leader needs to embrace technology. A leader needs to embrace the digital tools and all the implications that come with the digitization. At the same time, leaders should have a good feeling on what is actually their sweet spot. And I think there are still many, many more left. I'm not saying only for the year to come, but certainly for the years to come. What happens in 10 years and 15 years, I can't tell you, right? Because we're advancing so quickly. At the same time, also today, I'm a qualified coach. I'm a certified coach, right? And let me be honest with you. Before COVID kicked in, I have done all my personal coachings in person, right? All my individuals in person. And I would have never thought that actually, you would do a very good coaching session in a virtual setting. And I was proven wrong. Right? I do today 80% of my coachings. I really do them in a virtual setting, and they work super well. There are some exceptions, right, where I even go and have a walk with executives where we have, very deep conversations and reflections, and I'm, supporting and guiding them with that. But 80% is virtual. Now, even the first coaching platforms and companies are providing a chatbot based and AI based coaching. Is it great? No. Actually, it's still in a very infant state, right? But at the same time, you get a glimpse, you get a feeling of what could actually be possible in the future. So I think we really need to every year revisit what is our role, what can we do better than AI, what can we have replaced by AI, and give us some room for the more important topics. And then we still come to this emotional empathy topic that really connects us as humans, as we are really hardwired for human connections.
No, I completely agree. And it's like what you said, AI can support us and make so many things for us more efficient so that we can focus on other important things. And we should leaders should, allow people to, and teach people to allow AI to support us. But I mean, it can, for now, it cannot replace the human touch, as you like to put it. But yeah.
Exactly, and after all, it's great to talk to a person and to talk to Tora in person, and not to an AI-based tool. So it's good to have a conversation. Conversation is always something very human, right?
Exactly.
And also a conversation between a leader and an employee has a very human element in that, and it's really driven by humanity and by two people and what is happening between the two people, right? It's not a transaction; it's an interaction, right? It's a conversation, and it's super difficult to emulate this, of course, by AI. I'm not saying it's impossible because, yeah.
No, exactly. And imperfection. AI makes things too perfect. Humans are not perfect.
True.
And that is what makes us humans and what makes it interesting and fun. All the mistakes I've been making as I'm speaking to you, and you know what I mean? Just like this now.
Very
AI
true.
would not allow this. And this is what makes things human. So yeah, we also have another trending topic I wanted to run by you a little bit. The ongoing war for talent. So the increasing competition between recruiters in the search of top talent, So I was wondering, how crucial is effective leadership, and what innovative solutions, such as hiring freelancers maybe, could be employed to distinguish an organization?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because being now a freelancer myself, it's an interesting question. 2 weeks ago, I was with the top 200 global executives of an insurance company, and I started with a slide that showed the war of talent is over, talent has won.
Okay.
And with that, I want to provoke people a little bit, especially in the traditional organizations and in the legacy organizations. Because see, for many, many years, what we have been doing is we have been fighting against different other competitors to get the best people, right?
Yeah.
Today, actually, organizations are fighting or struggling or bargaining about the best people with the best people, right? Because the best people and many talented people, they can actually really choose from. Because first time in history, at least in Europe and also the US, I know it's a little different in other parts of the world, but in where I'm in my part where I'm living, we have an economic downswing on the one hand side. On the other hand side, we have full employment, right? We have a very strong employment rate still. And so the new generation, the well-educated talents can really choose from where they want to go. And they're getting super selective, right? And I'm not talking salary only. They're getting super selective on organizational culture, on leadership. So there's really a rethinking needed within organizations, because now they have to kind of apply for the best people, right? And so I do think that the narrow borders, right, that we had both in our mind and in the way we looked at companies, we need to really, soften them. Because I think if we want to get the best people within our company, they will never work for you, right? I mean, I think this is what Steve Jobs once said: the best people in the space will never work for you on average, right? So sometimes probably you have one of the single players that are really, one of the best in the industry, but in general, they work for other companies, or they're self-employed, right? And so the question is, how can you find contractual models, collaboration models in the ecosystem that allow you to tap into the best people in the industry without you having them to employ, right? And I'll give you an example from my very own experience right now. So I'm currently hired by a company that needs a new talent system, a new talent identification and development approach. And this is what I have done with the company for the last 6 months, because they didn't have somebody in their company doing that on that very strategic level that I was used to. Now the interesting thing comes, right? So I have, together with of course people internally in that company, I have crafted that new approach. And now we launched it, and now I'm kind of obsolete, right? So I'm stepping out again. So I had a good project. I learned a lot. I could help the company to, launch this new, very important talent approach. And now it's about execution. Now different other capabilities are needed. This is now done internally, right? So the company doesn't need somebody like me on their payroll for the entirety, right? So they don't need me for 3 to 5 years. They need me for half a year, right? And so they could tap into hopefully something that they were lacking, namely a good capacity and capability and experience in the market. For me, it was a great project. And I wouldn't get employed these days, right? Because I'm just enjoying it so much what I'm doing with different companies, different employers, different individuals and teams. And so here the company was creative and said, well, let's get somebody on board as a freelancer and tap into his knowledge. And then we let him or her go again. And I think these are models that more and more will be established. I know in the US, we have all this wording around a gig economy, right? So pretty interesting what's going on in that space. And I think this will only increase, right? Because also people have some kind of a need for independency on the one hand side. And I can just speak for myself. I also do have a need for affiliation. And so I'm, self-employed, I'm independent. At the same time, I can work in a system for a certain period of time to help people to make things better, to make them progress, and then step out again and hopefully be able to help someone else.
Okay, super interesting. And as a freelancer, do you ever go in and take like a leadership position? I mean, I know you coach in leadership and I guess coach other leaders, but do you, as a freelancer, would you even be able to go and take a leadership position for only 6 months?
Yeah, funny you asked that because currently I'm in that role.
Oh, right? You are actually. So it actually.
Yeah. So actually, the funny thing is, so I just told you one part of the story because this is the point I wanted to make, right? The other part of the story is that I got here, and then the head of talent management just left the company, and I was asked. Besides the project, I was also asked to lead the team at interim.
Yeah.
And this is interesting, right? Because it has two limitations. Limitation number one is my capacity. So I'm never selling myself for more than 3 weeks, 3 days a week, because I want to do, other assignments. This is what why I decided to become self-employed. So it has a time limitation. And the second limitation is that, of course, people know that in some very early point in the future, I will step out again. So I think, and this was my learning from the last six months since I'm here, is really how can I build up trust very quickly? How can I convince people to to be open with me, to support me, to support them, right? Because some would say, and rightly so, why should I invest in a relationship with Daniel? Because he will be gone soon again, and then a new leader comes in, and then I have to rebuild that relationship. So I would say it's I'm just trying to help people. I'm just trying to make them to clarify things for them. Again, as I said before, right? They have had unclarities, ambiguities, and I try to structure things for them. I bring them together. I also see hopefully potentials in people, right? So I think I have a good sensitivity to see what is really a potential in individuals, and I help them to get there and to grow even in this small period of time. So you don't have to ask me if that worked out well, right? You have to ask the people that I was leading, but I can just tell you it was a nice endeavor and also a very different and novel situation to me, because usually when I was a leader in a company, you usually sign up for 3 years, right? Then people also have an intrinsic motivation to kind of interact with you, to build up a relationship. But I must say I was very nicely welcomed here, and I think we really rocked the boat the last few months. So and then comes the personal aspect that, of course, then you're part of the system, and it's going to be sad to leave very soon. But this is every decision has its implication, but it's all good. Really fun. Yeah.
It is amazing. I mean, this is what it is to be a freelancer. Amazing. Right, Daniel, how can leaders attract and motivate today's talent?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that if you read the recent Gallup studies, reason number one why people leaving companies are leaders, right? So it doesn't mean that leaders are super nasty or whatever. This is one part of the answer, certainly. But the other part of it is that they don't feel value by the leaders. They don't feel that the leaders do something for their development. Again, coming back to what we discussed earlier. And so this is an issue. This means that I think that the number was, if I recall it correctly, 72% of the people leave the company because of bad managers. So this means, putting this positively, 75% of leaders, if they're doing a good job, they can retain people. They can keep people motivated, right? So this is the potential that I see in there. If you really think about the way you lead, if you really, see leadership as a personal privilege to serve people, to develop people. So that said, I think most companies look at motivation, and Daniel Pink's Drive book, like certainly one of the key books in the market, launched already like 10 plus years, right? All about motivation. It's pretty clear on paper, but a lot of companies are just inherently or explicitly, implicitly contradicting this still, right? Because for me, they're doing one mistake. They're seeing motivation, like people motivation, as something that is a financially driven aspect that is not so much an intrinsically, right, also social, sociological and and psychological phenomenon, right? And as long as companies still see this as a purely economic thing, in the sense of this is the homo economicus, right? Just give him or her more money and they will run faster, the sticks and carrot picture. As long as companies think about that, and still many, many do, you just have to look at their performance management systems. You just have to look at their bonus structures. That's all structured around this, I would say, false image of humans in the organization context. But as long as that's the case, they will fail. Right? Because they should recognize that motivation is something that really should come from internal, right? That is intrinsically being fired, because people see that there's some kind of a purpose. It doesn't have, this, big moral compass and big moral loaded purpose, but it can be, what's the purpose of my work? What's my contribution, right? And people want to see that. They want to see how they can make things better, how they can contribute, right? And what's their personal role in that. So I do think that, if you go deeply rooted into what motivation means and where it comes from, you always get back to the sources of human connection, of, personal drivers that you need to look at, which could be, affiliation, which could be, the hunger to succeed, to create impact and so on. And this is something that a good leader really, needs to trigger within people. If they just think that their only instrument is more money or the next position and level in the hierarchy, they fall really short and they won't do everything that they could do in order to, trigger the motivation of people. So this has never actually fundamentally changed so much. Now we see new generations coming into the marketplace that have a little bit of a different motivational architecture and structure within. But overall, that hasn't changed so much, but still, very sadly to say, but still many companies operate on this very ancient, motivational scheme and system today.
Yes, no, for sure. But I have a question as well. Do you, now that more companies are sort of working a more remote work model, do you think it's harder for a leader to sort of tap into this intrinsic motivation when everything is remote?
Yeah, great question. Something I can't tell you, finally I have an opinion. I didn't collect so much data points yet because we're in the middle of that storm right now, right? You read that in the press that many companies now start pulling people back into the office, right? And they just say, well, let's do it as we've done it before, just that you don't have to get in 5 days, you come in 3 days. That's stupid, right? That's a dull, that's super simplistic and it doesn't, really lead to great results. Because if you just try to, negate that the world has changed, that people nowadays have great technology at hand and they do a lot of MS Teams, Zoom meetings, right? And they get to the office just to do those MS Teams meetings, that's nonsense, right? So you have to find good ways and good reasons and purposes of bringing people back to the office. Now, that said, as I said, there's no blueprint for that. Every company needs to kind of find their way to get there. But that said, I do think so people have to become more or leaders have to become more creative and more innovative in the way that they create spaces that motivate people. And I'm saying this in two ways. The first way is that I personally think technologically a lot of our collaboration is feasible via virtual work. The question, and now we're getting again a bit philosophical, doesn't work also have an innately human component with, meeting people in 4 dimensions, right? Having a lunch with them, having a coffee with them, connecting to them. And I can just share like my personal perspective on that. And there are many, competing perspectives that, you could have very, very different opinions here. I just think you don't have to be in the office every day, right? But I think that a motivation to get to work also comes through the people that you see there, from the people that you work with, that you can stand, in a meeting room, you can discuss, you can argue, you can do a lot of this on MS Teams and on Zoom. No doubt about that, right? But this, let's have lunch together. Let's probably also talk a little bit about like your family, how you're doing in the job, what's your next vacation destination. You just don't do this if you're back to back on MS Teams calls, right? Because this is not the, let's say, the forum and the platform that people are used to for sharing personal things, right? So what's happening is that they totally negate that aspect of collaboration, so the interpersonal aspect, and that gets really reduced to the bare minimum. And as I said, is it technologically feasible? Yes. Is it from a humane perspective, is it desirable? I would say just partly, right? Yeah. So back to your question, is it more difficult? I would say yes, because we can't just, project the linearity of how we let people in the past into the future. We have to be more creative. We have to, create a purpose and a reason why people get to the office and then do something with them that they couldn't do likewise when they're sitting in their home offices. Yeah.
No, and I can imagine it's also more, once you, like we're speaking now, I can't even see you. But I'm speaking to you, we're having a conversation, but I feel like our conversation would be probably quite different if we were speaking in person. It's all about energies as well, and happiness, motivation. We bounce off each other when we speak to people in person. And Daniel, as I mentioned, you're in Germany, and I'm in Spain. Do you want to tell me a bit about how does the local work culture in Germany influence leadership and also in the wider DACH region? I'm sure, I'm not sure, but it might be quite different from how it is in Spain.
I think it is, right? I think it's two very strong influencing factors on the way we work. The one is the culture, the country culture, right? That influences how we work. And then like the local work culture, as you put it. And then it's also the company culture, right? So I think a very interesting question is like, if you have a strong national work culture and you have a very strong corporate work culture, which one actually wins? Right. Yeah. And so what I see is that if you want to become or want to work as a global well-functioning company, you need to have some kind of an institutional frame that everybody shares. Right. Let's say the institutional frame and the guidance is we should all be in the office from times to times because we see a bigger value in that. So we want to see especially the leaders across the world get back to the offices, be a role model. So if that's the general guidance, then in the companies that I have worked for, right, and I was a leader myself, it was always good to actually, look into what are we actually, how does this actually translate into the local cultures? So I can give you an example. I worked for a company and right after COVID, so when everything kind of smoothened out again, the CEO said, well, we should now write a letter to all leaders that everybody should get back to the office 3 days, right? The fun thing was the head of HR back then said, well, that's an interesting idea, but if you write those to the leaders in China, they are in the office 4 days already, right? Yeah. Or 5 days even, right? Because they have a different culture. If you write those to people in Spain and Germany or in Denmark, for them, this is a big change because they have kind of, worked their private lives around, not working from the physical office space. So again, I think there is one element is the company culture, and the other element is the local culture. To your question, in Germany we have a mix. So in Germany, as you know, German economy is very much driven by the small and medium-sized companies. So the German hidden champions in the industrial space, then the big automotive companies. If you look into those, with an industrial blue collar legacy, if you will, or a part of their organizational population, then they have a tendency to bring people back to the office more quickly. Also because they feel we need to create a fairness for the people that have to work in the factories that can't work remote, right? And so we're also sending back the white-collar people into the office spaces. Then, of course, there are also German software companies. I mean, I have worked for SAP, the biggest one in Europe. And they were super, super flexible. They actually attributed or kind of empowered all their leaders to take the decisions with their teams, to say, what's actually the right constellation of people that you bring to the office, the right days where you get together, or are you actually anyhow a global team that would never get together? Then probably you shouldn't think about how many days you should get back to the office, but you should find spaces probably once or twice a year where you do an offsite or everybody meets in the office and gets together for 1 or 2 weeks in a row. So certainly not like a direct answer that I can give you to that question, because it's pretty difficult. But I would say in general, German companies and German CEOs are a bit more conservative. However, if you look at, for example, the companies on the West Coast in the US, where everybody would have thought, well, these are, digital native companies. Now you're reading that they're pulling back people totally to their offices, right? They say everybody who is living in a radius of less than 30 kilometers, they should go to the office every day, right? And they don't do this in order to to get on the nerves of their employees. They just think that company culture can only be very difficult. It can only be created in a very difficult manner if everybody is offsite, right? But that's again here a very philosophical discussion even. And some people might say, well, you don't trust people if you think that they can do the best work at home. So it's a complex topic that we will need to talk a lot and need to find very good and innovative solutions in the years to come.
No, super interesting topic as well.
True.
Daniel, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. I'm checking the time. I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. Thank you so much for everything. I really enjoyed the conversation. I don't have this conversation so often about leadership, and I've actually feel like I've learned a lot from you today. I think I will buy your book. Super interesting.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tora. No, it was a great conversation, and I hope you feel that the topic of leadership is really a hard topic to me, right?
Yeah.
Because as a final statement, probably what I can share with you, I think we need more and not less leadership in the world, but we need a different kind of leadership, be it on the political space, be it in the society space, be it in the organizational space. We just need more of it in a different and more future-fit manner. And playing a little role in that as a consultant, as a coach in organizations, I really want to contribute a little bit with that, so that we really, making leadership again as something that it should be in the core. Namely, for me, as I said, a privilege to serve people in all ways of society, economy, and politics.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you for listening to Outwise Insights. If you're looking to hire top freelance talents or find your next project, visit outwise.com.